Hello and welcome to this interview with Jim Eaton. Jim, thank you ever so much for joining us today on the Together We Rise Summit. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, Catherine, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on
Yeah,
today. Yeah, yeah.
you were such an obvious contender for this interview series. And I'd love
Oh, that's good
to,
to hear.
yeah, I'd love to introduce you a little bit more to our viewers. So I'm just going to go over to your bio that I've got here. So you graduated from in maths from Oxford University.
Yeah, yeah, maths.
And it says here you tried a number of vocations, including working as a singer, a songwriter, an actor, a school teacher in inner city London. And yet, despite achieving success, you couldn't shift a profound sense of lacking and longing. And then what
Mm,
subsequently followed was an intense spiritual search that culminated in directly realizing the wholeness of being, the home that you'd been longing for. And then you've come across the relational practices of circling and surrendered leadership. And that through that,
mm,
you've instantly realized that this would help to integrate this realization into daily living and bring about real lasting transformation. And the
mm.
result of this journey is what you now call the authentic living approach. So yeah, I would love to just kind of jump in actually from that bio, and because I know you've had a really big journey.
Yeah,
And I'd just kind of love to hear kind of like the elements of that journey and how it's kind of related to you as a facilitator, as a leader in the work that you're doing.
yeah. It's a great question. It's quite funny for me listening back to you saying my bio because it reminds me of all those sort of stages I've sort of been through on this kind of search, which I think we're all on this great journey. And I'm just really looking for something that I didn't know what it was. And you look at the variety, like maths to like rock and roll to acting. I mean, it's just crazy. It's like, because it was like, oh no, it's not in academia. Oh no, it's not in that. It's not in that. It's not in that. Like trying to turn over all the stones.
Mm,
Um, and then that, yeah, led me into the spiritual seeking and different esoteric groups, but ultimately non-duality, which I think maybe a lot of people that are listening will be familiar with. And these beautiful practices of just taking time to just slow down and just tune in to what's here in the moment, tuning into the sensations and the feelings and thoughts and just noticing this presence that's here, that's aware of all of what I'm experiencing and kind of dropping more deeply into that. And from there, sort of discovering, yeah, this kind of beautiful realization, I call it wholeness there. I won't go into it too much because it's not really what we're going to be talking about, but actually feeling like, yeah, I've arrived home in the place I was searching for. And that was beautiful. And it was great for a period of time. And I even started to hold groups and invite people along to share those pointings and to drop in together into that place of presence. And it was really beautiful. And people were able to find that peace and that natural peace, natural joy. But what I started to notice over time was, yes, we can arrange like a retreat situation where there aren't the responsibilities and the pressures of our everyday life. And we can all kind of drop into that space. But as soon as we go back into the pressures of daily experience, then often it all collapses again. And we face the same struggles that we're always facing. And I noticed that about me too, even as the facilitator, like you were saying, giving it the perspective of the facilitator, that yes, I could sort of create this beautiful space of presence that we can all drop into. And yet, when I would go back to my personal life, and I had a wife, and I have a wife and children, and all the pressures that that brings with it, young children as well, that I was getting caught in the same old struggles in my relationship, and the same stresses that were causing tensions in my body. And so it's almost like I was living a kind of double life, and I was aware of that, and it didn't sit well with me.
Mm.
So yeah, I found myself exploring what was going on in me and the different um, old patterns that were getting triggered. Um, and actually, yeah, my wife and I, we went through a really difficult time where we actually separated for a few months, um, because it was getting really difficult. And I had to, yeah, really look at myself very deeply. And we worked with a therapist, a couples therapist. And what I started to realize was that actually I was always trying to avoid conflict. I was always trying to avoid difficult situations and upsetting people. And what that meant that I wasn't really bringing myself. And that was the frustration that was emerging in the relationship. And then I realized I wasn't really doing that in the meetings either.
Mm.
I was kind of going into sort of transpersonal, sort of channeling almost space, where I was able to be a great reflector and space holder. But in terms of my own patternings and struggles, that nothing was being worked with.
Mm.
Um, and this was really curious because it was just at this time, isn't that quite often the way, that I discovered these practices of circling and surrender leadership. And I just knew immediately that these were going to be the missing piece of the jigsaw, which would bring that presence into my relationships, into my daily experience in a way that I hadn't seen previously, I hadn't experienced previously. So if you think about like when you'd go to see a teacher, they're often at the front and they lead, meditation or guidance, and they might answer questions, very much focused on the person at the front. Um, and usually the people there don't really interact with each other, maybe socially, but not in the actual meeting.
Mm. Mm.
And I really felt like there was something really incredible available there that wasn't being utilized. And so with circling and the surrender leadership approach, what we're doing is we're bringing everybody in the space together to meet each other with certain practices that we bring in. And what that does is it gives you a chance to experience interacting with one other or groups of other people and receiving reflections on how you're bringing yourself. And like this for me was just so potent because almost immediately I started to see the ways that I was constraining how I was bringing myself
Mm.
in a way that I hadn't been able to notice previously in different therapies and all kinds of other modalities. Because of that interaction with lots of different people and groups of people, and bringing my own vulnerabilities. So not being the teacher, but bringing myself in,
Mm.
um, as as a vulnerable participant. And that was a massive shift. And I feel like for me, that shift was absolutely vital for my own development as a facilitator. Because previously I was still holding some kind of position, even though I
Mm.
didn't think I was. I was always double checking and triple checking myself. But actually I was, that there was some kind of identity in that, some sort of role that
Mm.
was limiting me. And as a consequence, it was limiting what I could offer. Um, so in sort of breaking out of that identification, and being in the sort of flow of the experience as it was emerging with whoever I was working with, and encouraging that mutually. Yeah, a completely different sort of aliveness started to appear in the space, which is really exciting. Yeah, I don't know how this is landing with you as I'm sharing a bit of my own journey. I'm
Hmm.
curious.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what I'm kind of firstly feeling is your authenticity in being here, in bringing yourself. And by you being authentic, there was like a softening that really happened in my body right at the beginning when you started talking. It was like, yeah, permission. It felt like a permission field kind of opened up here between us. And I
Mm,
could feel my shoulders soften and a kind of, yeah, just a general softening in my system. Because it was like, oh, now here comes the truth. And I can trust truth when it
mm,
when it arrives, when it's here, instead of like some kind of like presentation of Jim.
yeah,
It's actually
yeah,
like, here's the authentic Jim, here's the Jim that I can relate to, because you've talked about the challenges and difficulties that you've experienced in your relationship, and the process that you've been through around that. And so instead of you being this kind of like shiny guru separate, you're
yeah,
actually here in the room, alive, present, authentic with me. And so that opens up within me the possibility and the likelihood of my authenticity also being here. Because I don't feel like I have to defend or protect my ego in some way
mm,
because you're bigger and brighter and shinier than me, or that I have to
mm,
kind of naturally go into some kind of like submissive energy with you
yeah,
because I've put you up on a pedestal as teacher, but
yeah,
rather it's like, oh, here is a meeting. There's a meeting here. There's a meeting place. Um, so yeah, that's my experience in having this conversation.
yeah. It's beautifully said. And isn't it wonderful how me now listening to you sharing that, I'm noticing a deeper softening in me
Mm,
because I, I'm hearing that you understand where I'm coming from,
mm,
and that somehow what I'm bringing is being acknowledged. And so that brings a deeper softening in me. And I felt really touched actually to hear you acknowledging what it is I'm trying to get across here,
mm,
and the journey I've been on. It felt like, oh yeah, she really hears me, really acknowledges me. And as a consequence, I just want to bring more now. It's like it's this kind of virtuous cycle that we start to create in the connection
mm,
that enables us then to go deeper and to maybe bring even more vulnerability in because we feel heard and seen.
mm,
And there's something coming actually as I was speaking then. It doesn't mean that I lose my ability to be the facilitator either. So
mm,
I'm sort of guessing around a question that might be coming up for people listening to this. Oh yeah, you can be one of the participants, but then who's leading?
yeah,
And it's a
brilliant.
great question. And what it requires is this incredible dexterity in you as a facilitator, because in one moment you'll be presenting a new practice or arranging the group into different pairings or different size groups and explaining what practice that you'd like to bring, that you feel is just right for this moment. And so in that way, you're giving instruction in a way, and you're being very much a facilitator.
Mm,
And then as you begin the practice, it's like you dissolve into the space and you dissolve into the circle and into the practice and become a vulnerable participant. And so it's like this flexibility to move between, yeah, being that facilitator bringing instruction, or dissolving into the space and being a vulnerable participant in the journey we're on collectively.
Mm.
And yeah, just following your intuition on as that's needed. So that's part of being in what's emerging naturally in the space and what's required, and being almost like a kind of servant to that.
Yeah, I've got a
Yeah, it feels
question.
really important.
Yeah,
Yeah, go for it.
it's really beautiful how you describe that. And I've got a curiosity that maybe some people can't handle that, right? Because they want you to
Mhm.
be the teacher, the guru, the one who's kind of like holding the space and sitting in the chair at the front
Yeah,
and doing the thing, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
because they're in that position where they need to be kind of led and directed. And I'm
yeah,
curious what your direct experience has been with this shift from, being the teacher in the chair to this more surrendered leadership position. Like, have you had kickback from people around that?
yeah,
Resistance?
yeah. It's a really good question, Catherine. And yeah, I have. I had lots of people not coming ever again because that's what they wanted, and they didn't
Mm,
want this different way, different approach. And I totally respect that. And
mm,
um, there is a place. I think there is a place for that, and people who want someone very strong who's going to be a very uh, yeah, a very strong leader. That you were calling it a leader. I don't necessarily, leadership's not the right word maybe, but we can talk about what I think of leadership in a bit. But
mm.
yeah, they want that direction, that strong direction.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to criticize that because, we all need different things. And so I think that has a place. I just realized that that wasn't what I was here to bring anymore.
Yes.
And and I really sort of had to bow down to all those people that decided they didn't want to come to my groups anymore because of the shift.
Mm,
And that was difficult, actually. I mean, again, bringing my own vulnerability, because people think, oh, you're just holding a group, and I want to come or I don't want to come, and you don't care. And I do, but I do care. And so when people that you've formed a deep relationship with over a long period of time suddenly don't come to your meeting anymore, and you don't hear anything from them, it's
mm.
like it touches my own sense of abandonment. Or so you have to work with that as well, of course. But knowing that the movement that I'm being drawn in is more important
Yes.
than that. And that's part of my growth, to see that, how I was touched by that. So that was difficult. Um, but then of course, as I made the shift, new people then are drawn in who are excited, excuse me, by this new possibility.
Mm,
Um, so that's been wonderful. And then yeah, just forming new relationships with people who are really ready to really take responsibility for themselves and their experience, and really courageously bring themselves,
mm,
uh, and hold themselves, actually
mm.
feel the support in the room too, but actually see that they're really strong, and when they bring their truth, it's incredibly powerful in the space. So that it's like I'm championing that all the time. It's like, yeah, what's it like if you really dare to start to notice that intuitive wisdom that's coming through you in the moment, not what your rational mind is saying or trying to convince you into,
Mm.
but yeah, what's that deep intuitive movement? And yeah, sometimes you might get it wrong. That's okay. But sometimes you might really start to speak from that place and you start to feel what's possible. And it's like your confidence grows in that possibility. Um, and then you start to live it more and more. You start to bring it into your daily experience. And that's the integration piece,
Mm.
because you're working with other people all the time, a different person, a group of people. And so it's like helping you to integrate this new way of being into actually your daily relationships in a way that a kind of satsang or something like that doesn't offer.
Mm. And I reflect on a few things that I've heard you say, like some of the topics that
Yeah,
really
please do.
stuck out for me. And kind of like, this is my interpretation, but it's like this shift from like almost being in a dependency with your teacher, the person who's at the front, the person who's facilitating, into an independency where we get to be in it together. We get to be in the messiness of being human beings together.
Yeah.
And you know, it's my sense, and what you're sharing, it's what takes us, you said excuse me, confidence. And I was like curious about how the confidence that's created in your spaces by not being in these more dependent roles anymore, how that actually impacts resilience, because the tagline for this summit is building resilient futures, right?
Mhm.
So it's like together we rise, building resilient futures. And it feels to me that this shift from kind of like guru, teacher on the chair kind of facilitation to we're in it together facilitation actually gives rise to a collective resilience. And I'm curious if that resonates for you, and if it does, if you could speak into that.
Yeah, there's a few things coming up for me. So with that sense of independence that we're talking about and taking responsibility for your experience and being encouraged in that, it's like people start to see that actually they can bring themselves and be heard and be acknowledged because they've been given the opportunity to do that. And the encouragement to listen, I'm always, I'm never sure what to call it, but like that intuitive wisdom, inner voice. I mean, even intuition has got that inner tuition, like inner tutor. What some people might call it higher mind or higher self. It's like a deeper wisdom that we all have. And when you're encouraged to actually listen to that and bring it into the space and be acknowledged in that, it can be like a incredible revelation for people to start to see the wisdom that they always already have. So it's not like something they need to cultivate. It's like actually what we're doing is in a way seeing the impositions that are constraining that wisdom from coming through. And so as people do the practices more and more, and they start to realize that they have that voice inside of them, and it's never gone away, but it may have gone, they lost the ability to hear it. And as they start to reconnect to it, then it can really transform people into being much more dynamic and starting to embrace all the different energies that maybe they'd suppressed previously, like their kind of power energy, their sensuality, all these beautiful qualities that help us to experience a richer human experience. And it's like, again, that kind of virtuous cycle. And the more they see themselves bringing that and it being accepted and almost encouraged, really encouraged actually, and then people sort of play with you in that space. And you see yourself creating on the fly, like new possibilities that your rational mind couldn't even dream up. And then suddenly you're in this whole different playing out something with someone that you could never have imagined would ever happen. Then the excitement, that exuberance, it's just a win-win. And so that's why I think that reflects back into your daily experience and recognizing more resilience, more independence, and more willingness to bring the full range of your energy into your life, into your daily experience. That's one thing. And the other word that was coming very strongly as you were speaking was boundaries. And so this is something I realized I just didn't have healthy
Mm,
boundaries. That's how I grew up. So discovering that was another revelation. And this is something else that's encouraged in the circles. So it's, if I see someone sort of flinching or recoiling, but they don't share it, like it's like, oh yeah, I just noticed like a sort of tightening in your face, and I'm wondering what that's like for you.
mm,
So there's actually a curiosity for that person to actually be invited to look more deeply into what actually happened just then.
mm,
And then they might see, oh yeah, actually that really impacted me, what that person said. And then they're able to recognize that and then maybe say what impacted them and what they're actually needing in this moment. Maybe they're needing some more care and curiosity in how that person is interacting with them in order to have a deeper connection. That's what they're needing. And it's like learning how to put in a boundary, but in a very generous way. It's actually still inviting connection,
mm,
but it's being clear about how what just happened impacted me or whoever, and being clear about what you need. And so this for me was like, wow, I can do that. Yeah, okay. And so suddenly, the feedback into your own system is, I trust you, I value you, and I want to protect you.
mm.
And then that, your system just loves that, just relaxes into that. Oh, finally, we got some protection now. And that's, again, another virtuous feedback loop. Every time I acknowledge what's actually happening and I make clear what I'm needing,
Mm,
it's like that feedback loop saying, yeah, I'm valuable and I'm important. And every time I don't do it and I go, oh, it doesn't matter, and I suppress myself, it's almost like I'm saying the opposite. Oh, I don't matter. I'm
mm,
not valuable.
mm,
People can do what they want with me because I'm not significant. I'm insignificant. And so that, yeah, that was huge for me. In part, I was very much part of the shift that I went through because I saw in the old way I was bringing myself, how I was always accommodating. I was always trying to
mm,
make people feel good or okay with what's happening, to my own suppression sometimes.
mm,
And that's not good for anyone. It's not good for the other person because it means that I'm not giving them the feedback they need to really grow themselves. And I'm not stepping in myself and growing myself in naming what's actually happening in this moment. So yeah, really important process that's been for me.
mm.
And I'm sure that's resonating with a lot of people. What's that like for you, Catherine, to hear that?
I mean, it's really beautiful. Boundaries and learning about what we need is one of the key things that I've been teaching people over the years, because I see it's such
Right.
a big part that gets missed due to developmental trauma, where our needs weren't
Mm.
acknowledged and reflected back to us and met when we were younger. So we kind of move through life in this kind of disconnect from self, and then behave in
Yeah.
ways that don't support us and kind of overstep our limits and boundaries and capacity. So hearing how this has been such powerful medicine for you to come into a different relationship with your worthiness is beautiful. And I
Yeah.
want to ask you a question about that, because to be in that relationship with another and to notice that flinch, to notice that shift in energy, that takes
Yeah.
quite a level of like perception, both kind of like inner felt sense experience and sense of what's happening on the outside.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, how have you developed that sense on your journey?
Yeah, it's a great question again. And this is how I see the spiritual aspect fitting beautifully with these practices. So, like, there's two things that I offer. One is circling and one is surrendered leadership, which builds on the circling. So the circling is a series of practices that start with what on the face of it looks very much like meditation, where, but like I was saying at the start, so this is something that comes very directly from my sort of history in spirituality, which is just taking that moment to slow down, maybe close your eyes, and just connect in to the experience of right now. So it's almost like you're letting go of all your assumptions and conclusions and just meeting this experience freshly in this immediate moment. And in doing that and connecting to your sensation, maybe the tingling in your feet or your pulsing in your hands, noticing the breath, and just noticing what feelings are here. And thoughts too, maybe, yeah, thoughts that are distracted, or maybe your mind's very empty and feels very open. Just by slowing down and noticing all the aspects of the experience, it's like this new sensitivity starts to become available. And that sensitivity is sort of aware of the different nuances of the experience that we often, like layers of experience that we often overlook because of our busyness or preoccupations. So that's the first practice. And I almost, like in the Zen practice, they call it beginner's mind. It's like coming back to that beginning place where we're all dropping into that presence. It's a word, it's just a word, presence or awareness, whatever you want to call it. Like who you are, it doesn't need a label. And it's curious because you're aware of your body, you're aware of your thoughts, your mind. So it's almost like prior to that too. So becoming acquainted with that presence and that sensitivity. And then we then shift kind of seamlessly into the second practice where we're just meeting each other like eye to eye. And there's no goal to the practice, but it's about noticing what happens when I open my eyes from being in my own world and experiencing what's going on for me to meeting you and seeing, well, what does that do differently as I open my eyes and meet you? Maybe there's a sort of a rush of energy as I come into the connection. Maybe I want to look away, but because I think I should be meeting your eyes, I suppress my natural movement to look away and I force myself to look at you. And just seeing all the different things that start to happen as I come into connection, but not saying anything, just noticing it in silence. And then we take that into sharing with words like, oh yeah, oh, I'm noticing there's some tension in my legs and my breath is tightened up as I'm with you right now. And just by saying that, I'm noticing I'm relaxing again. And yeah, by receiving you and noticing that you're with me, I'm feeling more relaxed and yeah, more at ease. So and you can share as well as you're with me, what's happening, and just let it move backwards and forwards. I'm not saying we have to do it now, but I almost felt we were going to drop into it then. Yeah, and then the last one is just being curious about what might be going on for the other person and inquiring. And then the way we do that is like I'm imagining that you might be curious about this, and that's it's an important way of bringing it because it means that I'm owning what I'm bringing. I'm not saying you're this. I'm saying, oh,
Mhm.
I'm imagining there might be some sadness there. And then you're free to confirm that, or, oh, actually, no, Jim, there isn't.
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe it's me.
Mhm.
So there's no putting things on, pinning things on people.
Mhm.
So those are basic circling practices that enable us to start to meet in a more authentic, kind of deeper way. And then what I was just going to go on to say, the surrender leadership practice. So that those circling practices are quite structured, because there's those kind of ways of interacting. And then we might do focus circles where we'll have 2 or 3 people who'll be with one person as the focus, using those same practices. So that's very structured, because when you meet another person, it's a human being is so sophisticated that there's so many things that can happen, that structure helps to kind of get the ball rolling. But when we go into surrendered leadership, it's like we take that structure away, so we can come into a whole group session where everybody becomes like the focus simultaneously. And so we're all encouraged to bring whatever's coming through us in the moment into the space. And then we just see how, so we follow, it's like following the golden thread. Like, what does that bring up in anyone in the group, and where does it go next?
Mhm.
And that might turn into movement, or some kind of self-expression, or some kind of conscious touch, or some sort of improvised animal play, or whatever. It might go in any way it wants to go. And what we often discover is that sort of collective themes that maybe this particular group of people in this space, in this moment, are all kind of exploring on some level. And then
Mhm.
the group starts to kind of take us into that exploration. And it's almost like we're a group mind that's exploring the edge of that issue
Mhm.
together in that moment, like the sort of, like pioneering how this could be resolved together in the space, because we're just following that sort of intuitive wisdom that's coming through each of us and us as a collective.
Mhm.
So that's why it's called surrendered leadership, because there's a surrender of the controlling sort of rational mind uh, into that kind of more intuitive wisdom and what it's saying in the moment. But at the same time, by speaking from that place, you're actually in your true leadership. And that goes back to what we talked about before with, you know, being responsible and stepping into your independence and bringing that kind of uniqueness, that unique voice that only you have in all of time and space, and having an encouragement to really bring that into the field. That's your leadership.
Mhm.
So it's a curious kind of connection of words, like surrendered leadership.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. There's so much that you've just shared, Jim. I've written a couple of notes to kind of like
Yeah.
um uh to offer some prompts here. And yeah, just to kind of go back a few steps, this, what I'm hearing you say is that in order to be able to kind of facilitate, right, we need to be able to have a deep connection with ourselves. We need to be able to communicate what we're sensing and feeling and experiencing with another,
Mm.
and how that impacts the field as a whole. And so, if I was a facilitator or want to be facilitator listening to this right now, um,
Mm.
I'm hearing that the message is like, you've got to be able to have the capacity to sense and feel and know what's happening inside on the ever
Yeah.
increasing subtle levels,
Yeah.
right? So that has to
And
be a practice.
yeah, and not just being aware of that, but acting on the wisdom of that
Mhm.
knowing.
Mhm.
So as a facilitator, you have to be yourself in a place of surrender. So you can have, yeah, something's coming. I want to stand up for the rational mind as well.
Mhm.
I'm not one of those people that wants to denigrate the rational mind and the thought process. I think our intellectual capacity is actually incredibly magical and wonderful. I want to celebrate it, actually. Incredible conceptualizing ability that we have to have these conversations. We're both wearing spectacles, which all comes from the incredible inventions that rational mind has been able to come up with. It enables us to have a richer experience, travel across the world and, do all kinds of things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I'm all for the rational mind,
Mhm.
but the rational mind as a tool in the toolkit. I remember hearing someone once say, what was it? Yeah, if you want to look at the moon, a spanner isn't the right tool, right? So you can't look at the moon with a spanner. You need a telescope. And it's kind of like that's what we do with the rational mind. We use it for the wrong things.
Mm.
We use it for the right things, but we use it too much in a way to like lead us, where when we can tap into that deeper wisdom, that's the true master. That's the inner teacher, the inner tuition. And then the rational mind is like a servant to that movement.
Mhm.
So what I've found, the more successful facilitation is when you're really responding to that surrender, to that wisdom that's coming through you, and trusting in that wisdom and then acting on its intelligence.
Mhm.
And the more you do that, the more you start to realize you really can trust in that.
Mhm.
And it will take your rational mind might think, no, we've got to do this thing. This is what we always do. But your deeper wisdom saying, no, right now, this is where I really feel we need to go.
Mhm.
And so you follow that.
Mhm.
And always it turns out to be very, very rich. And so that's really what I would encourage. Um, Developing that trust. And this isn't just for facilitation, Catherine. We talked about this when we were talking about doing this interview. And like my journey is to live that way, is to
Yes.
live from that wisdom that's coming through me, like being like a servant to that truth, uh, knowing that actually it's it's what's optimal for Jim too. Even though Jim might have all these ideas, so it might be weird to sound like me speaking about myself in the third
Mhm.
person, but sometimes I really see it that way. That sort of deeper, higher mind is what I truly am, and it's sort of wearing the clothing of Jim, and
Mm.
through Jim can bring itself into this physical reality. And the more of us that are living in that way, I think will usher in an incredible transformation in the way that we collectively live as a species, as a race.
Mm.
And I noticed we're getting into bigger themes here. Yeah.
But I mean, what we're talking into really is like the purpose of facilitation is to create transformation for the people that we are working with, and thereby create transformation within the culture and,
Yeah, I think
and the
so.
bigger global culture.
Yeah. And I'm noticing a voice coming up in me as we're speaking that like when I was very deeply into spirituality, it was almost like that was a dirty word to talk about that. It wasn't about that. No, it's about being and like resting in being. And then anything else is like, well, don't even bother about that. Just, it's all about being, consciousness. But my sense is no, that's only half the picture.
Yes.
What comes through me very strongly and very insistently is no, this is about being who you are, not just knowing and resting in who you are, but being who you are, expressing who you are, living through this human vehicle and experiencing the full spectrum of what it's like to be a human being. Like we said earlier, the power, the strength, the sensuality, the creativity, the sort of melancholiness, the sadness of losing a loved one, or yeah, like things not going the way you planned.
Mm.
These are all part of the human journey,
Mm.
and opening yourself to that. Sometimes people call it the mess of what it is to be human, is part of it. And it's almost like your heart expanding to be able to hold all of that as it is. And then, yeah, following that intuitive wisdom and seeing how it shows up with you in your expression, how it shows up as you meet others, how it wants to kind of constellate itself. I just find that that's so exciting,
Mm.
and the growth potential of that.
I'm kind of having a wry smile at the moment because this theme that you speak into has been quite prevalent in the number of conversations that I've been having so far. And there's been
Mm.
different words that have been used to describe it. But, you know, what you're kind of describing is like traditional kind of non-duality consciousness, which actually creates its own duality because it's the separation from the body. It's almost like, you know, this masculine, feminine split that happens. And what I'm hearing you now describe is like you got all of that bit, and now you're coming back home and into the body. Perhaps some
Yeah,
people might resonate with coming back more into like the feminine, the intuition, the felt sense, the knowing, and into a kind of deeper relational context. Um, so there's this deep
yeah,
integration between these two poles within yourself.
yeah. I think it's slightly more nuanced than that, but I think
Okay.
you're absolutely right, because in non-duality, it's not about just resting in the awareness or the presence, whatever you want to call it, but you, as you start to look from that place, you start to see the experience of life as like a flow of perception, like a flow of like a spontaneously arising flow of color and sound and
Mhm.
smell and taste and sensation and feeling and thought that kind of creates the as if experience of being a person in a world. So you see that the consciousness is kind of decorating itself as the experience of right now. So they're not two things.
Mm.
So there is the acknowledgement that, so first of all, it's like, oh, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm what's aware of that.
Mhm.
And then it's, oh, I am the body, I am the mind, and I am everything.
Mm.
Not I, Jim, but I, the consciousness, is being everything, all and everything.
Mm.
So there is that recognition. But what seems to get lost out of the picture is that the things that I'm not experiencing. So if I'm in a nice, peaceful state, I don't notice maybe some of my trauma or some of my limiting beliefs or the patterns that constrain me when I come into relationship. And so I can
Mm.
convince myself that that stuff doesn't exist because I'm not conscious of it. It's in my unconscious. And so what can happen is people can have the realization of presence, and they can see that there's no division. So as I look at you now, it's like the image of Catherine is consciousness being that.
Mm.
It's like there's no external physical reality that I'm separate from as a consciousness. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to go too far down that road, but so it's not naive of the idea of coming back in, right? So that would be more of a tantric path, is coming from being the awareness or the Shiva,
Mm.
and then acknowledging the Shakti, like the play
Mm.
of life,
Mm.
and that Shiva and Shakti are always entwined, and that the love making of the two is what is the world.
Mm.
So that there is that recognition. But then this is the piece that gets left out, is that when you come back into relationships with people, and unless you arrange your life accordingly so that you're never with people that challenge you, and this is what some gurus do, right? Because the people they meet are their disciples, or they live quite remotely and they don't engage in sort of life as maybe you would do if you're a householder, or if you have a regular job, or you're in life,
Mm.
so that you just avoid the difficult interactions. But if you don't and you come into them, you soon realize, no matter what it is that you've recognized or discovered in your spiritual practice, that yeah, all this stuff is still here, and you've got to embrace it and integrate. And it's only these relational practices where you're thrown right in there to bring your
Mm.
vulnerability that, for me, were the key to really reflecting back to me, like the clearest mirror, what I'm missing, what I haven't seen. And then the surrendered leadership practice is such an amazing way of integrating that into everyday life, because in the surrendered leadership practice, you're actually, in a way, you're living the non-duality,
Mm.
because you're responding and you're in interactions, but just following that flow as it's coming through you. I mean, some people sometimes say this is the most like being on drugs that I've ever experienced without taking drugs, because you're in that immediacy and you just don't know what you're going to do next, but something happens, and it's like you see your body moving and you experience your voice coming through you, and this kind of wisdom just pouring out of you. Enjoying your smile right now.
I'm
Hmm.
enjoying the eloquence by which you communicate and the passion that's coming through as you
Yeah, I'm
describe.
glad that's coming through. I really feel it as I'm
Mm.
speaking. I feel like I really want to excite people to really go for it and to really
Mm.
start to allow themselves to bring that deeper voice. I mean, it's crazy as you start to notice, like, even simple things like you might be wearing a jacket and you start to feel a bit hot, and you notice this intuition, oh, I need to take my jacket off. And no, I'm not going to do that right now. It's like this rational mind, oh, I don't want to do that right now. Or you want to go to the toilet. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that right now. I want to finish this first. And it's like we constantly override this
Yes.
natural intuitive voice.
Mm.
No wonder it's quite hard to hear at some point.
Mm.
So what we're doing is, oh no, I want to take my jacket off. So just take your jacket off. I want to go to the toilet. You just go to the toilet. You just follow it. You say yes to it. And you
Yeah.
start to see your life reorganizing itself around you, who you really are, bringing yourself into life. And I
It,
just want to be a champion for that with everyone.
it's so interesting how all of these like social rules that we've learned,
Yeah,
right, of how things are meant to be and how things are meant to look.
yeah,
And therefore we have to kind of, constrain ourselves in some way. Like you said, I mean, I was at a party at the weekend. And, I remember I was standing there with my hands on my hips, and it was quite a busy room, and people kept knocking past me. And I was like, oh, okay, that position doesn't work. Like, where do my hands want to be? And I used to drink alcohol and I don't anymore. So I don't have a
mm,
glass in my hand to kind of occupy my hands. I was like, oh,
yeah.
where do I put my hand? Like, I don't know, like they go here. Like, where is the natural place for them to be? And then like watching what other people are doing with their hands, and they're like, they've either got a glass in their hand or they've got a phone in their hand, they've always got an object there to kind of like facilitate and support them in
Mhm.
some way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just kind of was watching myself in this, and it's like years ago I used to smoke, right? So that would be another distraction for me to do whilst in company. So now I'm freshly learning, like, what do these things want to do when I'm
Yeah,
in a
beautiful.
big group of people?
Mm,
Um, and it's this level of subtlety that we're talking about. Because when I start to do something different with my hands, then there's like an awkwardness maybe, or uncomfortability or shame
yeah,
that comes up that I then have to
yeah,
meet whilst
yeah.
being relational. And, in some contexts, like in the circling context, we get to kind of practice with other people who are also practicing. But in real life, like at this party, I couldn't suddenly say to these people, hey, I'm noticing that I feel really awkward because I don't know where to put my hands. They'd have probably just looked at me like, she's weird. Like I didn't know any of these people, right? I was a new person at this event. So yeah, there's so much that kind of is going on kind of unconsciously that when we just
Mhm,
bring a little bit more awareness to it's like, wow, this is all here. This is all what I'm
mm.
with whilst I'm being relational.
Yeah, and something that's coming to me as you're speaking is like, uh, that's okay. Like sometimes your inner tuition or inner guidance is to bring yourself in a way that fits in.
Yes.
And that's actually the intelligence in that moment.
Yeah.
And to sort of act out some kind of weirdness is actually something else, some sort of pattern that's trying to be different or be noticed. Or so,
Mm,
it's very practical, this. It's always tuned in to the most optimal way of bringing yourself in the moment.
yeah.
And sometimes that isn't to rock the car. It's like just rock the boat. It's just to fit in seamlessly.
Mm,
So it doesn't have to look like anything. And sometimes people email me after meetings and stuff. Oh, yeah, I noticed this. Should I do this or this? What do you think? And it's like it's not about what you do, because for one person that would be authentic, and for another person that same action would be completely inauthentic. It's
mhm,
about where is it coming from? Is it coming from some imposition that you've brought in because you think you should, or is it coming just from a kind of a knowing, a deeper knowing? And so that distinction and starting to tune into that is really important.
mm,
And something else that's coming is yeah, I remember as I started to feel more and more comfortable, it's like the joy of, like when you said the word shame, and I notice a lot of shame comes up for many people around sensuality. So
mm,
sort of being able to, like, in a moment experience, like I'm just doing it now, like with my hand, like the kind of softness and the flow and the slowness of feeling what it's like to move my hands in space and appreciate that kind of delicacy and that sort of sensuality in my body, and allow myself to explore that while someone might be sort of with me and noticing me,
mm,
and feeling the edges of shame coming up and then allowing them to just slowly dissipate, and more, and then maybe we naturally consensually come into a place where we sort of hold our hands together,
mm,
and there's nothing in it. It's completely innocent.
mm,
It's just we're enjoying what it's like to feel that and allow ourselves and notice what might be coming up around it as we allow ourselves. And then going further with it if that feels comfortable, or there's a willingness or not, and just stepping back and just experiencing what that was like. So this, it's so gentle, and the invitation is so innocent that we can start to bring online energies that maybe we've shut down for many years because we felt so much shame around it.
mm,
Uh, and the other one that I notice a lot is that power and that strength energy. Especially being English, sometimes we feel, I know I did anyway, I speak for myself, like to speak in a very strong, direct way is almost like I shouldn't really be doing that. I should,
mm,
even when something happens that requires that. And to being a father and having two young boys, it's like sometimes that is love. Love speaks in a very direct, powerful way.
Mm.
And so getting in tune with that energy and allowing that to flow through you when it's needed. Another revelation. So there's the power energy and the sensuality, creativity, all of these, all the different colors, energetic colors that we can allow to flow through us, as well as the compassion and the kindness and the care.
Mm.
Yeah, really opening ourselves up to being a fully expressed human.
Mm.
That's part of what's being invited.
Mm. I'm aware of time here, Jim, and I think we could kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
we
Probably
could
go
be
on
here
forever.
for hours, right? But I want to bring like one last question in, if that's okay for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine.
Which is, could you kind of like synthesize in some way the salient points around, what do you feel, given everything that you've been learning, really makes
Yeah.
for the facilitation that we need at this time?
Yeah, so that word surrender seems to be really important here.
Mm.
And it's not a weak surrender. It's not, that's why I love that. I think I suggested the word surrender leadership uh, as a title for this.
Mm.
That's why I think it's such a beautiful, and that's not my um, phrase, by the way. It comes from an organization called Circling Europe that I've done a lot of work with.
Mm.
Really great organization, and that's something they coined, and I think it's really apt because it has the invitation to surrender. So in my facilitation, it's like, yes, I have the knowledge of what I've learned and the skills that I've brought in through my own practice and through my experience. But the way in which I'm going to bring those is in a surrender to this kind of deeper knowing. Again, I'm not really sure what to call it. It's almost like the voice of your soul,
Mm.
or the higher mind, higher self coming through you. A kind of surrender to the wisdom and the intelligence of that. And it is a sort of courage that's required in that to not continually default to like what your rational mind is saying and some kind of structure that you've honed in and you've got really familiar with,
Mm.
because we can get a bit lazy with that because we've done it so much and we know it and we can sort of fall back on it, and that actually can take us out of our greatest, bringing our greatest self in this moment, which is being in presence, being in
Mm.
surrender, and following and trusting in that whatever's coming through us, and being courageous enough to act on that,
Mm.
even though you might not be sure. And
Mm.
a lot of the times I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, but it feels right. It feels like the
Mm.
way I should go. So it's not a weak surrender. There's leadership in it. And it's trusting that what will come through you is tuned to what's best for all in that particular moment.
Mhm.
So I want to encourage all the facilitators that are listening to this to start to explore that edge more and more, and like maybe just noticing it to begin with, where a choice point opens up for you in your facilitation where something is sort of calling you, but you don't quite know. And then there's your default response, which you've tried and tested, and just maybe allowing yourself just a little bit. You don't have to like dive in at the deep end, but just a little bit. Oh, what is that calling that I'm feeling in this moment? Where does it want to take me? And allowing yourself to follow it. And you've always got what you've always done as your backup if it doesn't work. But just allowing yourself that leeway to explore a bit. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised because for me, when I'm in that not knowing, there's such an aliveness to it, such an exuberance that it's kind of contagious for the group.
Mm.
And it brings that aliveness into the group because, yeah, we are together in this emergent field right now, and we don't know. None of us know. And we're working it through together. We're seeing what wants to emerge from our group mind in this moment.
Mm.
And that's how something new is born.
Mm.
Um, so that's the sort of takeaway piece that I would really want to invite people to start to step into. And it's not easy. I would be the first because it requires you letting go of the kind of identity you formed around the way that you facilitated in the past. But in a way, that's why it is such a beautiful invitation because it's freeing you up actually,
Mm.
because that identity will limit you.
Mm.
And so there is a courageousness around it because you're opening up your own vulnerabilities.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it there because I could just carry on and carry on. So, but yeah,
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. That's really powerful wisdom to be sharing with the audience. I'm super grateful for that. And I know you've got a a free gift, and I just want to talk into that. So if people want to have
yeah,
access to you, I'm going to put all of your information in the notes, obviously. But you're offering a
yeah,
free online introduction to circling in January, the 6th of January.
that's right.
So if people have been inspired by circling and they want to learn more from you, they can just sign up using that link, and then you can join Jim in January and go on a little journey around circling. Do you want to just say like a few words about that experience?
Yeah, so it'd be a short hour and a half introduction. We'll go through some of the practices I've named this evening, and you'll get to work with people and experience what it's like. And then if it's something that you feel drawn to, yeah, I do lots of weekend events in London, Bristol, locally in Devon. I'm living in Devon right now. Stroud as well, or online as well. So you can come and dive in more deeply if it's something you're interested in.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I want to thank you, Catherine, as well for inviting me on and for doing this summit and for getting this information and this sort of invitation out there into the field so that yeah, people more and more people are encouraged to start to take this step, which I
Mm.
think is a really powerful, healthy step for us collectively. Um, yeah, I think it's the next kind of iteration of leadership, facilitation, and empowering not only for the leader themselves, but for everyone that comes to that leader's offering.
Mm.
That's been my experience. And I think we're really ready for it. So many people are really ready for it, really
Yeah.
stepping in to yeah, being who they are and bringing who they really are into
Mm.
life.
Mm.
And we need it. We need it. We need people standing up, standing up and bringing themselves, not just towing the line and being afraid of speaking what's true for them and what might come back. Yeah, knowing that they can, they're
Mm.
supported in bringing themselves. Yeah. And
Mm.
so thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I look forward to our ongoing journey as well.
Mm. Thank you so much, Jim, for bringing your
Yeah.
wisdom and just the beautiful way in which you communicate and share with so much clarity and precision. I'm sure
Oh,
that's going to be really felt by the audience. And yeah, big gratitude to you for being the person that you are. Mm.
thank you. Yeah, noticing it's good for me to be able to receive that. Something else that I've been noticing is people bringing their gratitude and sort of me saying, oh, okay, thanks, but not really hearing it, sort of
Mm,
slightly dodging it, you know? So like, thank you. And I'm receiving that into my heart. So
mm,
thanks again.
beautiful.